best time to sell is when you're doing really well, right? And I think a lot of founders miss that because I think a lot of strategic acquisitions, founders have almost perpetual liability. They say that a founder has three main pitches in life. One is a sales pitch, one is the investor pitch, one is the consumer pitch, and one is the employee pitch. And you really need to actually master all three, right? Because that's your job as a founder, is actually you're just a salesperson.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A fun fact that nobody knows about you. Welcome to this new episode of Champions with Checkbooks. This is an initiative by the Women in Investing Network, a 450 plus strong community of women investors in India. I'm Sapna, representing the WII network. We have a very special guest today. She has built a consumer brand from scratch, later sold it to a strategic player, and recently she transitioned to being an investor. She has seen the entire cycle. There is lots to unpack and learn from her. Welcoming Shuchi Pandya, principal at Fireside Ventures and ex-founder of the loved jewelry brand Pipa Bella. Thank you for joining us at our studio, Shuchi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shuchi, let's start with your journey. How you started a D2C brand, at a time where this was not, the concept didn't even exist, and to now when you're now investing in consumer brands yourself.
So, I actually grew up in a family of jewelers. So jewelry was very close to my heart. Business talk and business conversations were very normal part of the dinner table conversations. And when I graduated from undergrad, I actually worked with my dad in the family business. We were managing exports of jewelry. And it was a very B2B manufacturing heavy business. Somewhere I had a passion for the consumer side of things, and I felt maybe my learning was not really there. So I decided to actually go back to business school, get exposed to new age business models, understand, what is the landscape. This was back in 2010. So I ended up in the US at Wharton, and this was a very interesting time because out of, a lot of these business schools, there were founders who were emerging and building very interesting business models for the consumer space. So there was Warby Parker, there was Bonobos, there was Rent the Runway, and they were all building, with business models that D2C was at the heart of it. And D2C in the US at that time was very, very new and emerging. Whereas in India, no one had even heard of the concept.
This is which year?
This is 2010.
Okay.
So Flipkart, Myntra, those kind of platforms, right, which was like e-commerce type platforms, was more of the flavor of the season rather than D2C, I would say. And that was still very new. So when I came back in 2012, I said, I want to, I know jewelry, I understand it. Why don't I start something in the online space? And we were, knew nothing about tech, knew nothing about Magento, Shopify, none of that stuff. And even the ecosystem at that time was very new. So there was really no, like, Google Analytics also didn't exist, etc. So I started, with a small website, very basic e-commerce type of play, and very slowly built the business, completely bootstrapped for about 4 to 5 years. And then in 2016, I met Kaval through a dear friend of mine, and that really changed it for me, because I said, oh wow, there's actually investors also who invest in consumer. I didn't even know that was even possible. And he was building his fund at the time. So he was just starting up Fireside, and he had just transitioned from his family office to building an AIF. And so through a couple of years of talking to him, discussing the business, in 2018, Fireside came on board as an investor, is part of their Fund 1. And that was a real game changer for me, right? Capital, but of course, here are, few people who actually really understand the space and understand how to scale a business. So started building the pillars of not just D2C, but also everything from how to look at data more effectively, how to think about the brand, how to build the org. And so all of those pillars started, developing. And then in 2020, we had an opportunity to, some of these verticalized platforms were actually interested in the jewelry space. All of a sudden, it had become an interesting space, and so we had a lot of conversations with Flipkart, Myntra. We were talking to Amazon, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's a space we're quite interested in," and things. And then Nykaa was one of the few players that also emerged, and there I felt that there was a lot of synergy with the consumers, both of Pipa Bella as well as Nykaa. And so, the conversation just very organically moved towards, hey, why don't we see if there's a strategic partnership available? And so, within about 4 to 5 months, the conversation moved from just strategic discussions to actually an acquisition. And by early 2021, Nykaa had acquired Pipa Bella. And I joined the team, the Nykaa fashion team. This was pre-IPO, and it was also a time when they were building out the Nykaa fashion private label business. The way they had built out the Nykaa Beauty private label business. So it was also a very interesting time because I had the opportunity not just to think about Pipa Bella, but also what are the various other opportunities within fashion. So we built within that short pre-IPO phase, we built a couple of other fashion brands. And then, we started looking at more. IPO happened, we started looking at more opportunities. And then my exposure to fashion overall increased quite a bit because I started looking at the brand strategy for 10, 11 private label brands across ethnic wear, Western wear, innerwear, accessories, etc. That was, I think, just a lot of exposure to the entire fashion spectrum, not just jewelry, which I knew well. So I think that gave me a lot of horizontal understanding of the space. I think then I was at some point last year, I was really craving the, I think, startup ecosystem again. I think that was something at the end of the day was very close to my heart, working and building and creating something from scratch. So I reached out to Kaval. I think he's always been a mentor for me, but reached out to him and said, look, I'm dabbling with the idea of potentially becoming an investor. I don't know what that means, but I understand the space well. I understand the 0 to 1 journey well of building. So is there an opportunity? And he was like, look, why don't you just join us, and we would love to have you. And I think that's how the investor journey began, very organically. I think for me, I could not have asked for a better outcome in terms of investor because I knew the team really well and was so comfortable with the Fireside team, and at the same time doing exactly what I wanted to do in terms of career. So was a very organic journey.
It's been now that you've spent some time with Fireside. What are some of the things that you see are different for, let's say, if an operator wants to move to investing?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between operating and investing?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is you're not in the driver's seat, right? Yeah. I think that it's the biggest, I would say, mindset shift that needs to be done, and it's not as hard as it seems because I think when you make that decision to move, I think you're already mentally saying, look, I don't want to be an operator anymore. I actually want to work at a maybe 5,000 feet level, not at a ground level. So I think that anyways mindset is there. I think also you have to start wearing not just an investor hat, but also a fund hat to say, okay, look, while this business in isolation looks great, what does that mean for the overall fund, right? And so I think that also means zooming out, very often when you're looking at investment opportunities. And then the ability to, I think, guide a founder while not rolling up your sleeves and saying, let's do it. And sometimes, you maybe because of your experience, you are able to maybe foresee things that could go wrong before a founder can see it. And I think the ability to hold back and say, look, it's, while I can see this happening, it's okay if you make a few mistakes. And I think the biggest skill set that at least we're able to bring operator turned VCs is A, obviously empathy, right? But B, the ability to do just that, right? Foresee where things could go wrong, so you can steer the founder in a direction that that can be a little bit more, maybe mitigate that risk a little bit of things going wrong. So I think just understanding how to not be in that driver's seat, putting on that fund hat, those are some of the key skills I would say you need to develop over time. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us more about Fireside Ventures.
Yeah.
What are your focus areas within the fund, and what kind of founders can approach you?
Sure. So Fireside is an early stage fund. We typically invest when a company has maybe hit about 20-30 lakhs of monthly sales, going up to maybe about 1.5 crores. That's our sweet spot. We will put in a check anywhere from 8 to 10 crores, going up to about 20 crores, and we can invest in a company all the way up to 40 crores as well over multiple rounds. This is our third fund. We're about halfway deployed, and we take a sectoral focus in the fund. So we have 4 sectors ranging from fashion and home, which is the sector that I lead. There is a beauty personal care, there's food and beverage, and there is healthcare, and it's more consumer healthcare. And our view is a very thesis forward view. So we will actually spend a lot of our time building theses in various sectors and spaces that we think are going to be disruptive in the next 7 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
We're taking a very futuristic view, because coming in early, our bets really kind of materialize only 7 to 10 years down the line.
Yeah.
So having that futuristic view is important. And hence we spend a lot of time actually doing consumer research, going on the ground, speaking to consumers, speaking to retailers, speaking to the overall ecosystem, understanding what is moving, and then being able to take those views of spaces which have not been recognized or identified yet by the mass, right? Because once it becomes a trend, then it's not the right time to invest. You want to actually come in at that very, very, very core inflection point before it becomes a trend. I think that's the beauty of early stage. So we spend a lot of time on that, and then we engage very deeply with founders. So we have programmatic views, programmatic approaches, institutionalized approaches towards engaging with founders once they become part of our portfolio. So we have a 10 to 100 crore program, which is specific to challenges that a founder will face in the 10 to 100 crore journey. And that can range everything from GTM, product market fit, establishing the brand, etc. And then the 100 to 500 crore journey is a completely different program. And there it's much more about, how do you, now that you build those pillars, how do you now maybe, unlock more growth by new product extensions, new category extensions, brand acquisitions or brand building. It's about org. Org is an important part at that 100 to 500 crore stage. So we actually take on a very programmatic view. A lot of us at Fireside are actually ex-operators. So again, we're able to bring some level of expertise to the table, and deep partnerships with the ecosystem as well, with Meta, Google, Amazon, etc. helps us engage with founders a little bit more meaningfully as well.
Your experience is unique in the sense that you've raised capital from a VC fund for your own venture, and then you sold it to Nykaa. And after that, you worked with Nykaa. You spent time with them for about 2.5 years, leading their private label fashion business. For founders, many founders in India have not seen that exit cycle yet, right? So what is the right time to sell the business? Like, how should a founder think about it?
Yeah. See, in my mind, there's never a right time, right? Because to be honest, what can motivate a founder to sell? There could be extrinsic factors, there could be intrinsic motivations, right? There could be many things that can push a founder towards selling. What I do think the best time to sell is when you're doing really well. Right. And I think a lot of founders miss that, because I think there is this thing that, I'll just wait, I'll just raise a little bit more money. And I actually think that's the best. That's a trap in my mind. I think if you are looking for an exit as a founder and you're saying, this is my path and I'm building this to eventually have an exit, then I would say go for it when your business is actually at a high. Because you can demand great multiples. There's you have multiple options on the table. You don't have to negotiate on very, very critical terms such as your transition period, your earnings payout. I think these are all terms that ultimately you want to have the upper hand while you're negotiating, right? So that's my take. I don't think there's any right time, but I think there is a best time,
Sure.
which is when you're on the top. So
that makes sense. Actually, this was my next question as well. When you've made up your mind as a founder to sell the business, and when you're negotiating with a strategic player, what are those 2 or 3 non-negotiables you should keep in mind? Because this is not common knowledge in the market.
See, I think what are the transition timelines, right? I think that's an important one. Is there a vesting period involved? Is there a I think negotiating on that, depending on what and then that will also link to there's a non-compete in the agreement. So I think just figuring that piece out. Then second is your payouts, right? Is there a tranched payout? Is it a one-time payout? I think figuring that out as well. I think the third one, which I think is a very legal thing, but I actually think a lot of founders don't realize, is this idea of liability, and I think negotiate such that at least I think a lot of strategic acquisitions founders have almost perpetual liability, and that is something that should be negotiated, and I think to me it's a very clear non-negotiable. Yes. Make sure you get a good lawyer to help you through that, but yeah.
Okay, I think now switching gears to founders who are building businesses.
Yeah.
Specifically consumer brands. So now that you meet so many founders building consumer brands, you've seen their journey. What are some of those top 1 or 2 mistakes you've seen them making, which they can easily avoid?
Right. So I think when it comes to, I think a lot of founders, especially when it comes to team, I think that's where a lot of mistakes happen early on, right? I think because most founders, they come in, they understand the product really well. We see a lot of product out founders. And I think there, we also see them kind of have that strength. And we also, when we invest at an early stage, it's a risk where underwriting, which is a very mitigated risk we underwrite, because typically we want to come in where at least some PMF is happening. But on the GTM side and on the brand side, what you need is the team. And I think there often what happens is founders tend to either hire for the wrong jobs or not have a clear understanding of what the job requirement is, and hence look for the wrong things in people. I also think that founders give up equity too easily sometimes at the early stage in terms of both investors as well as employees in the ESOP side. I think you have to be very mindful, have a very good assessment of who you're giving up equity for, because if you're building something large, then over time you will raise multiple rounds, and you just don't want to be in a situation where you're down to low single digits at the end of your journey, and that becomes very demotivating. So I think having enough skin in the game early on is important for a founder, and making very good hiring decisions early on. I would say if founders can just focus on that, besides the PMF part, at least the early journey gets a lot smoother.
And how about, creating a brand? Do you see many founders are focused on it from day one, or do you see that actually focus is not so much there?
I think there are 2 aspects to building a brand. One is the brand that you're pitching to consumers, and the other is the brand that you're pitching to employees. Okay. And I see that as one umbrella overall story, but there's also 2 efforts that need to be made on either side, right? I think when you're pitching to consumers, there's clearly like the product, the emotional benefits, functional benefits of the product that you need to very clearly outline and communicate to the consumer. But at the employer side, I mean, it's like they say that a founder has 3 main pitches in life. One is a sales pitch, one is the investor pitch, one is the consumer pitch, and one is the employee pitch. And you really need to actually master all three, right? Because that's your job as a founder, is actually you're just a
You're a
salesperson.
salesperson, yeah.
Exactly.
That's true.
So in terms of the employee pitch, right? I think just figuring out what is your employer brand. And one of my colleagues, she's at Fireside, has spent a lot of time on helping companies actually build their employer brand. Because it's so critical in early days, and a lot of founders just skip that. They're saying, "Oh, culture baad mein dekhenge," let's first sell the product. But actually, that's how you're attracting talent. So for building, so I think that's important.
I think another trend that we're seeing is a lot of founders, they realize after a point that to scale, you need to be present omni-channel.
Yes.
But many of them feel that it's an unknown territory. They're scared. How do you know when's the right time for you to go omni-channel, and how do you prep your org to do that?
Yeah. So I think there was a point of time, maybe 5 years ago, when we would have told brands go offline later.
Yeah.
Right. Focus on online. There's enough to do online. And also, I think the ecosystem around online was less developed back then. So there was a lot more work that needed to be done to get to, say, even 1,800 crores online. A lot more team building, a lot more. I think everyone was also understanding the ecosystem. So there was a lot of learning just generally in the environment, in the ecosystem. I think that has changed drastically. I think we're seeing companies go online within 2 years, go from 0 to 100 crores just online. Whether it's marketplace plus D2C. So I think once you hit PMF, scaling is online is actually not a challenge anymore. So we're in fact saying that, you have the ability to go offline much sooner. We're seeing that depending on the category, there are complexities, right? So for example, in FMCG, the complexity around GTMT is very high, because, you need to establish the right type of outlets where you want to be present, which fit the brand. But B, also, it's very unforgiving. Those channels, if you do it wrong, they're not going to give you second chances. On the other hand, certain categories lend themselves better to, say, an EBO, MBO type of model. And there, it could be quite a profitable channel as well. Like in fashion, we're seeing, EBO channel to be a much more profitable channel. So it actually flows directly to your bottom line. But then again, you have to think through things like inventory and supply chain, and are you ready for offline? That offline and online synergy. Ultimately, both need to speak to each other, because from the consumer point of view, they don't look at your brand as XYZ offline and XYZ online. They want to look at it as a unified experience. And so a lot of that needs to come into play. But we are encouraging our brands to go offline earlier. We see that the online journey is a little bit more automated now. But once you have that scale, it goes into autopilot, and the offline actually enables the online sales as well for a lot of categories.
That's fair. And I think over time, we will see in offline as well, a lot of the ecosystem will develop. You will have a lot of service providers who will help you automate some of these things.
Correct.
With that, for new founders who are thinking about building a consumer brand, what are some of the gaps you're seeing in the market? There's just so many of them out there. Sometimes you really feel what's left.
Actually, there's, if you think about it, India will be a $6 trillion economy in like 7 years. 60% of that is going to be driven by consumption. And if you look at the way consumers are becoming more affluent and discretionary spends are going up, you actually have this entire middle class India, which has not even come into discretionary spends, or is slowly getting there, right? And they are a highly aspirational class. They are a class where they, everything from education to what they wear, to where they eat, to even being able to travel abroad for the first time. I think that entire ecosystem is evolving. So while, what we call India One is, of course, everyone is targeting them, and they're a little bit more of an evolved ecosystem and evolved consumer class. There you're talking about experiential consumer brands, right? So for example, one of our companies, a sleep company, they are giving you very IP tech-led mattresses, but for that India one consumer who's willing to pay, say, 25,000-30,000 for a mattress, right? And at the same time, there is this India 2 consumer who is looking at that consumer and saying, look, I won't be able to afford that, but can I, get the same value at a, much cheaper price? So there's those kind of brands have to do a lot more value engineering, where they're saying, we want to give you that value proposition, but at an affordable price. So, in terms of opportunities and spaces, I think if you look at everything from healthy foods, right? Like that's in India 1 play typically till date, but India 2 is now also moving into that aspirational segment where they're saying, look, we understand that certain types of foods are bad for us, and we want, Mamaearth is a perfect example on the personal care side, right? I think they started as an India 1 brand, and they've been able to expand their TAM into an India 2 segment simply on that no toxins, no baddies type of proposition, and it's aspirational enough for the India 2 community. So I think across sectors we're seeing opportunities. The other thing another way to think about it is India is a very young population. So Gen Z, I think building for Gen Z and millennial is a large opportunity, and how their habits are changing. Like Gen Z are born interneters, right? So they have seen internet from the day they were born, and for them buying online is just not even no question of doubt whatsoever. So they'll enter the ecosystem much early, and can you build for them? I think the silver economy is another one where they have a lot of discretionary income, and no one's actually built for them at all. And if, interestingly, I think people who do build for the silver economy build there's an opportunity to build for a more, like I would say, leisure-based brand for silver economy. So not only centered around healthcare and around, like, say, a more palliative care type of approach, but actually, just, hey, look, good lifestyle, living a good wellness based life. And that silver economy actually is, I think, a big wide space which no one has tapped into. I think millennial parents, I think that's another one. The millennials, again, who've been this very aspirational parent or a consumer who grew up again in the internet age, but is very experimental with how they look at brands. Now they have become parents. Now how they respond to, or how they engage with brands for their children is another trend we're seeing, because they're taking their same maybe obsession with Googling everything, or obsession with sustainability, conscious consumption. They're taking all of that into their children's lifestyles as well. As children they want healthier eating options for their children. They want healthier or more organic, sustainable clothing options for their children. Again with skincare as well. Like they want options which are not going to harm the skin for their children. So they just by seeing that, and then even education, right? I mean, I think like parents are so obsessed with the learning outcomes of children today, right? So I think those are areas where we would see a lot of white spaces coming up as well.
Thanks for sharing
lots actually,
that.
But I feel like I just gave you like one snippet, but there are actually lots.
This is very good, I think, for our founders listening to this episode. So with this, we are towards the last section of our episode. This is a rapid fire round that we do typically. So if you're ready, we should start. Okay, good, all right. Okay, I'd start with this, which is one of the founders who you really admire.
So I guess similar to what we just spoke about, I think there's a brand called Slurp Farm, which is part of our portfolio. Meghna and Shorvi run it, two moms, and I think I've been a fan of what they've been building since day one. So I would probably put them on my list. Yeah.
Okay, all right. An investor whose work inspires you.
So obviously Kaval, but he's been a mentor, not just an investor. But also, I think I'm very inspired by. There's a fund in the US called Forerunner Ventures, another consumer fund, similar size as us, similar ethos. Kirsten Green runs that. I think she's been very inspiring to me as well. So.
Okay. You mentioned Kaval as your mentor, but any other professional, personal shout outs? Anybody who
Can I say my husband? or my family. I think I would probably give him the shout out because I think I'm a mum, and work requires me to be in Bangalore very often, and I honestly don't think I could do it without having a very equal partner at home. So a lot of props to him now.
Okay. A piece of jewelry that you don't leave home without.
Actually, it's unfortunate. I have a bangle that I never leave the house without, and I have left today. Okay. It was a gift from my mom, so it's a bangle I never leave my house without usually. Yeah.
Okay, all right. A book that you read recently that you would recommend to others?
So I read a book recently called The Courage to be Disliked. Excellent book on how to develop a stronger inner compass and have a stronger view of who you are as a person. So the ability to take feedback, negative, positive, in a good way. I think it's highly recommended for anyone, professional, personal. Really uplifts how you think about your personal growth.
Sure. Lastly, a fun fact that nobody knows about you, or few people know about you.
Yeah, I think a few of my colleagues know about this, but so actually, I am in a very parallel universe. I am actually a certified assistant Montessori teacher.
Oh,
yeah. So it's a I think I got into the Montessori philosophy a few years ago and was really obsessed with just the idea of child education and how there's so many gaps in the way we teach our children today. So I went down this almost rabbit hole path of researching different educational philosophies and landed on Montessorian philosophy as one which really spoke to me.
Sure.
And obviously, my daughter is at a Montessori school, but I think that inspired me to end up actually taking a certification in it as well. So it's like a parallel universe of mine. If I was not an investor, maybe I would have been a nursery school teacher or something. Wow. It's definitely
needs a lot of patience.
It does, absolutely. I think it's when you go down that path, you realize so many things about yourself that need to change.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was a very rewarding path as well. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we're towards the end of our episode. I had an very fun conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise, Sapna. It was so fun.
Thank you so much for coming all the way in this time for Bangalore's traffic to us.
No, appreciate it.
But thank you so much for giving us your time and all the very best.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. Honestly, I think it's such a great platform for women to be able to speak and build their own personal brand, and also more than anything, engage with other female investors and talk to founders as well. So really appreciate it.
Yes, sometimes we are also surprised it's grown so fast to 450 plus member community.
That's incredible.
We're very proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sapna.